In the humid summer of 1954, above the mountains of Guatemala, a small airplane circled villages and dropped leaflets meant to terrify a country into surrender. Radio voices warned that a rebel army was coming. Politicians in Washington spoke of communism. Executives in Boston spoke more quietly over maps, land titles, railway contracts, and shipping routes. Behind the language of the Cold War sat a fruit so ordinary that today it bruises in lunchboxes and ripens beside cereal bowls. That is the part that feels almost ridiculous until you follow the money. By the middle of the 20th century, one American company had turned bananas into railways, ports, plantations, propaganda, and political pressure. The United Fruit Company did not merely sell fruit from Central America. In some places, it controlled the tracks that moved it, the docks that loaded it, the towns where workers lived, and the politicians who feared crossing it. And yet the banana on your counter does not look powerful. It looks soft, cheap, harmless. It is the fruit parents throw into school bags because it comes in its own wrapper. It is the smoothie fruit, the breakfast fruit, the supermarket fruit, stacked in yellow arcs under fluorescent light. It feels too ordinary to have a dark history. That is the trick. The banana became powerful because it was ordinary, because it could be sold to millions of people every week at a price low enough to feel natural. To keep it that cheap, someone had to build a machine around it. Land had to be controlled. Railways had to cut through jungle. Workers had to harvest fast. Ships had to leave on schedule. Governments had to stay friendly. Every banana had to look like every other banana. And the strangest part is that this perfect sameness also made the banana fragile. The banana most of the world eats today is not born from a seed. It is copied from another plant, then copied again, across millions of acres. A supermarket banana is not just fruit. It is a clone in a global empire of clones. Now that empire is being hunted by a fungus in the soil. It moves slowly on boots, tools, water, roots, and mud. Once it enters a field, it can remain for decades. It does not care about borders, brands, or grocery prices. So the real story of bananas is not only the story of a fruit. It is the story of how humans took a wild, seedy plant from the forest and turned it into sweetness, empire, monopoly, massacre, scientific panic, and one of the most vulnerable foods in the modern world. If you like stories where ordinary food turns into empire, trade, obsession, and hidden history, subscribe to Food Empire's History. Now, to understand how bananas became this powerful, we have to go back to where the story really begins. Long before railroads, fruit companies, and refrigerated ships, the first bananas grew in the tropical forests of Southeast Asia and New Guinea, in landscapes thick with rain, volcanic soil, insects, and leaves broad enough to catch the sky. These were not the smooth yellow bananas of a modern fruit bowl. Wild bananas were smaller, tougher, and often packed with hard black seeds. Their flesh could be thin, starchy, bitter, or awkward to eat. A person biting into one would meet more resistance than pleasure, but early farmers saw possibility where most people would have seen a difficult plant. Around New Guinea and nearby island worlds, human hands began selecting the plants that behaved differently. One had more flesh, another had fewer seeds, another grew well near a garden clearing, another produced a useful bunch at the right moment in the rainy season. No one called this genetic engineering, but that is what it was, slow, patient, and repeated across generations. The banana had a strange gift. Some plants could produce fruit without fertile seeds. For people, that meant softer flesh and easier eating. For the plant, it meant dependence. A seedless banana could not spread itself the old way. It needed people to cut a sucker from the base, carry it, bury it, water it, and protect it until it became the next plant. Wheat can be sown as grain. Rice can be scattered into wet fields. The edible banana carried its future as living tissue. This is why bananas spread with migration, not just trade. Austronesian voyagers carried banana plants across islands and sea roads. Farmers took them into new valleys. Traders and travelers moved them westward into Southeast Asia, the Indian subcontinent, and Africa. Each new place changed the banana. Some varieties became sweet dessert fruits. Others became starchy cooking bananas, boiled, roasted, pounded, or fermented. Long before the banana became a snack, it was a crop of survival. In many tropical regions, bananas and plantains did what grain could not. They grew in humid places, produced heavy bunches above the ground, and could be harvested through much of the year. Then they became more than food. Leaves served as plates and wrappers. Fruit appeared in offerings. In parts of East Africa, bananas became beer, inheritance, bride wealth, identity, and daily survival. By the time European sailors reached the African coast, banana cultivation was already old in many tropical worlds. Portuguese and Spanish ships later carried banana plants across the Atlantic into the Caribbean and the Americas, not as the center of a grand fruit empire at first, but as useful food in the colonial tropics. The plants took well to heat, rain, and volcanic soil. Leaves unfurled, bunches swelled. A living cargo found a new stage. But one fact kept bananas mostly local for centuries. They ripen, soften, spot, collapse, and rot. You could grow them in the tropics, but you could not easily sell them fresh to distant cities full of people who had never seen a banana tree. The fruit needed speed. It needed ships fast enough, markets hungry enough, and businessmen ruthless enough to make time obey the banana. The man who saw the opening was miner Cooper Keith. In the 1870s, Keith was building a railroad through Costa Rica, from the capital toward the Caribbean port of Limon. On paper, the line was supposed to move coffee. In reality, it became a corridor of mud, fever, debt, and death. Workers cut through rainforest heat, while disease moved faster than the tracks. Men came from Jamaica, China, Italy, Honduras, and the United States. Many never returned. Keith lost money, workers, and family. The jungle did not care about contracts, so he planted bananas along the railway, partly as food, partly as a way to use the land, partly as a gamble. If the train could carry coffee to the coast, it could carry green bananas too. The side business became the business. Green bananas cut from the tropics could ripen during the journey north, and American cities quickly learned to crave this cheap tropical sweetness. The great commercial banana of that age was the Gros Michel. It was larger and sturdier than the Cavendish most people eat now. Its skin was thick enough to survive bruising. Its flesh was creamy and intensely aromatic. It traveled well, ripened well, and looked impressive on a counter. The banana had finally found its industrial body, a fruit that could cross oceans and still look desirable when it reached the buyer. In 1899, Keith's interests merged with Boston Fruit Company, and the United Fruit Company was born. The name sounded almost harmless, as if it belonged on a crate. But the company that grew from it became one of the most powerful private forces in the Americas. It owned plantations, railroads, ports, telegraph lines, warehouses, steamships, and huge stretches of land. The banana had crossed the line from crop to system. This is where the food stopped being food. A banana bought in an American city now depended on land concessions in Central America, railway contracts, shipping schedules, port fees, labor discipline, diplomatic pressure, and corporate secrecy. Every cheap bunch carried invisible infrastructure behind it. There were ledgers in Boston, plantation managers in the tropics, politicians negotiating under pressure, and workers cutting fruit in heat the final customer never felt. United Fruit understood that control over bananas required control over movement. If you controlled the railway, growers needed you. If you controlled the port, exporters needed you. If you controlled the ships, markets needed you. If you controlled enough land, governments had to listen. Its refrigerated vessels, the Great White Fleet, moved through Caribbean water with green fruit below deck. To consumers, they delivered freshness. To the company, they delivered leverage. The clearest example came in Guatemala. By the early 1950s, President Jacobo Arbenz supported land reform in a country where land was concentrated in very few hands. United Fruit owned enormous holdings, including land it did not actively farm. The reform aimed to redistribute unused land and compensate owners based on declared tax values. That last detail cut deep because the company had valued its own land low for taxes, then insisted it was worth far more when the government wanted to buy it. United Fruit answered with public relations, lobbying, and alarm. Edward Bernays, one of the architects of modern public relations, helped shape the American story of Guatemala as a communist threat. Journalists were guided, politicians were warned. The language of bananas disappeared behind the language of ideology. The public heard about the Cold War. The company saw land, railways, and profit. In 1954, the CIA backed the overthrow of Arbenz in Operation PB Success. A democratically elected government fell, and Guatemala entered a long period of violence whose consequences reached far beyond any fruit plantation. That is what makes the banana story so unsettling. The object is small enough to fit in a hand, but the system around it became large enough to help break a country. And Guatemala was not the only wound. In 1928, banana workers near Ciénaga, Colombia, went on strike against conditions tied to United Fruit's operations. They asked for things that sound basic now: cash wages instead of company scrip, written contracts, rest days, sanitation, and recognition of their work as real employment. Families gathered near the railway and the plaza. The fruit waited, the ships waited. The company wanted order restored. The Colombian army opened fire. The exact number of dead remains disputed, but the event became known as the Banana Massacre. Its memory entered Colombian literature and political history because it exposed the hidden equation of the banana trade. A delay in export could be treated as a crisis. A worker's life could be treated as a cost. The people who ate bananas rarely saw the people who made bananas cheap. Then biology entered the story like a quiet revenge. The Gros Michel, the very fruit that made the empire work, had one devastating weakness: it was cloned. The plantations were not fields of varied individuals with different strengths and vulnerabilities. They were vast repetitions of the same genetic body. Row after row, country after country, the banana industry had planted sameness because sameness was profitable. Sameness made the fruit easier to harvest, pack, ship, ripen, price, and sell. Every bunch behaved predictably. Every crate fit the system. But in nature, sameness is an invitation. A disease that can kill one plant can kill all of them. There is no resistant neighbor, no lucky variation, no hidden survivor in the crowd. A monoculture looks efficient until the right enemy arrives. That enemy was Panama disease, caused by a soil-borne fusarium fungus. It entered through the roots and moved into the plant's vascular system, blocking water and nutrients until the leaves yellowed, wilted, and collapsed. Once the fungus established itself, it could remain for many years. Sprays could not simply erase it. Fire could not easily solve it. Moving on became the business plan. The banana companies abandoned infected lands and cut into new regions. Forests fell. Rail lines shifted. Capital moved. Workers moved or were discarded. But the fungus traveled too in soil, water, tools, and the mud on boots. By the middle of the 20th century, the Gros Michel was no longer commercially viable on the scale the world demanded. The banana that had built the empire was dying from the empire's own logic. The industry needed a replacement, and the answer had been waiting far from the tropics of Central America, in aristocratic England. The Cavendish banana had been cultivated in the 19th century at Chatsworth House, associated with the Cavendish family, the Dukes of Devonshire. It was not famous because it was the best banana in the world. It became famous because it survived what the Gros Michel could not. The Cavendish did not taste as rich. Its skin was thinner. It bruised more easily, but it resisted the strain of Panama disease that had destroyed the Gros Michel. For an industry staring at collapse, that was enough. Plantations were replanted, supply chains adjusted, supermarkets changed without most customers understanding what had happened. A fruit that millions had known disappeared from ordinary commerce, and another took its place so completely that later generations grew up thinking the replacement was the original. But here is the disturbing part. The industry escaped one monoculture by building another. Every Cavendish banana is also a clone. The same system that made the Gros Michel vulnerable was rebuilt around a new variety. This was not because nobody remembered the disaster. They remembered it very well. But the economics of bananas reward uniformity. One variety means predictable yields, standardized boxes, controlled ripening, efficient shipping, simple branding, and consistent consumer expectations. For several decades, the gamble seemed to work. The Cavendish became the global export banana. It filled supermarket shelves from North America to Europe to East Asia. Bananas became one of the most traded fruits in the world, and for many households, one of the cheapest fresh foods available. The supply chain became an industrial performance of timing. Harvest green, wash, sort, box, chill, ship, ripen, deliver yellow, sell fast. A banana in a European or American supermarket may have been cut in Ecuador, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, or the Philippines while still green and firm. It traveled in refrigerated containers held at temperatures designed to pause ripening without damaging the fruit. At distribution centers, sealed ripening rooms used ethylene gas to wake the fruit at the right moment. What looks natural on the shelf is often the result of precise choreography. That choreography made bananas feel local even when they were global. The fruit is tropical, but the shopper experiences it as constant. It appears in winter and summer. It is sold loose, cheap, and familiar. It asks no cooking, no peeling knife, no special knowledge. The entire history of empire, labor, plant disease, shipping, and controlled atmosphere technology disappears behind a peel that opens in seconds. Then the soil answered again. In the late 20th century, a new strain of the Fusarium fungus began spreading through Cavendish plantations. It became known as Tropical Race 4, or TR4. The old protection no longer worked. The one quality that had made the Cavendish the savior of the banana trade, resistance to the earlier Panama disease strain, did not protect it from this one. The replacement banana was now facing its own version of the old disaster. TR4 is frightening because it is patient. It sits in soil. It moves in tiny amounts of contaminated dirt. It enters roots and blocks the plant from within. A farm can look normal until yellowing leaves begin to tell the truth. Once the disease is established, the land becomes extremely difficult and costly to manage. For a crop built around repetition, one infected field can feel like a warning written in the ground. The disease spread through parts of Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and eventually Latin America. When TR4 was confirmed in Colombia in 2019, the news landed heavily because Latin America is central to the export banana trade. Later confirmations in countries such as Peru and Venezuela showed the threat was not contained to one farm or one border. The fungus had entered the region whose plantations help feed distant supermarket shelves. This does not mean every banana on Earth is about to vanish. Bananas are diverse, and many communities grow varieties that never appear in Western supermarkets. But the export banana, the familiar Cavendish, is exposed. The fruit that dominates international trade is genetically narrow, commercially standardized, and biologically vulnerable. The danger is not that the idea of a banana disappears. The danger is that the cheap, uniform banana the modern market expects may not be sustainable in the form we know. Scientists are trying to break the cycle. Some work with wild banana relatives and resistant varieties, searching for traits that can survive TR4 without losing the qualities consumers and supply chains demand. But breeding bananas is slow because many commercial bananas are sterile or nearly sterile. A plant may resist disease but taste wrong. It may taste good but bruise in shipping. Nature offers answers, but not always in the shape a supermarket wants. Genetic engineering has produced one of the most important new chapters. Researchers in Australia developed a modified Cavendish known as QCAV4, designed with resistance to TR4. Australia approved it for commercial production, a historic moment for fruit biotechnology. But approval in one country is not the same as acceptance across the world. Food regulation, trade rules, labeling, public trust, and consumer suspicion all stand between a laboratory success and a global banana shelf. Even if science produces a resistant banana, the deeper question remains: will the industry use that breakthrough to create resilience, or simply plant another clone across another empire of sameness? A new resistant variety could buy time. But if it becomes the next single global banana, the old pattern remains. The fungus changes, the industry changes, the monoculture survives under a new name. Meanwhile, for millions of people, bananas and plantains are not just snacks. In parts of Africa, the Caribbean, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, they are food security, income, culture, and daily calories. A disease that harms banana crops does not merely inconvenience wealthy shoppers making smoothies. It can threaten farmers, workers, local markets, and families who depend on the crop far more directly than the person choosing between apples and bananas in a bright supermarket aisle. The modern shelf hides all of this. It hides the forest origins, the ancient farmers, the canoe voyages, the railways, the company towns, the coup, the massacre, the dead Gros Michel, the refrigerated container, the ripening room, the fungus, the laboratory seedling, and the farmer watching yellow leaves with dread. The shelf reduces the story to a price tag and a color. Green means wait, yellow means eat, brown means hurry. The next time you pick up a banana, you are holding a contradiction. It is ancient and modern, tropical and global, soft and political, a fruit of village gardens and corporate empires, a symbol of convenience built on one of the most fragile biological foundations in the food system. It shows how modern food often works. We take a living thing, narrow it, standardize it, scale it, brand it, ship it, and call the result normal. Then we act surprised when nature finds the weakness. That is the final power of this fruit. It does not announce its history. It waits for you to notice. Behind the peel is not just sweetness, but a story of forests, migration, ritual, empire, labor, disease, science, and the dangerous dream of making nature uniform. The banana may be the most ordinary fruit in the store, but ordinary is exactly how it conquered the world. If this story changed the way you see bananas, subscribe for more hidden food histories, and the next time you peel one open, remember how much the world had to move for it to reach your hand.